Imagine not being able to read the paper because your hands were shaking. Imagine not being able to read newsprint as your world faded to black. The National Federation of the Blind, Newsline, Indiana. With your host, Lee Martin, and co-host, Florence Myers-McSwine.
We want to welcome you to the National Federation of the Blind Newsline show. We want to thank you once again for joining us, our viewers and listeners, and a lot of the responses that we have been getting as we have journeyed through the state of Indiana with the National Federation of the Blind Newsline show. And we want to thank our Indiana State Library as our sponsor, as well as our state legislators. So today we have a great guest, and we're going to get right on into this. So Florence, how are you doing today?
I am doing wonderful today. And Lee, we talked a little bit earlier before the show about this wonderful guest that we have today.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Oh, I can't wait either. We've got Miss Denise Brown on as our special guest today, all the way from Philadelphia. And Denise, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to join you today. I've heard much about your show, and I'm glad you picked me as a guest so I can share some information with our NFB family.
All right. Now,
we just pluck stars out the sky all the time. So.
Well, Lee, let's talk a little bit about NFB Newsline and how essential this free audio information service is to the blind, visually impaired community.
Yes, I love Newsline. It's one of the things I promote as I'm going around trying to get new members in our organization. I use Newsline every day. From reading newspapers. My favorite newspaper is the New York Times. That's what I go to first. Checking out the business section and the arts and entertainment section, style section. For Philadelphia, we have a Philadelphia online section, and I check out other newspapers in Pennsylvania. In times when we were traveling from place to place, when we would have a convention, I would always start reading the newspaper of that city that we were getting ready to go to, because I want to check out what's going on in the area. I'm also checking to see what entertainment things I might decide to go see, or any sports events that might be in the area at that time. Of course, there are many magazines that I go to in Newsline, especially the Braille Monitor. I like to go to the technology magazines that are in there so I can keep up with what new apps may be coming up for my iPhone, or just to keep abreast of the advances that are coming to the world and the accessibility that is out there for blind individuals. Of course, when I started Newsline, one of the initial things that I did also was to check it out as far as my television stations were concerned in the Philadelphia area, where I was able to hone in on the channel lineups and go through the system and figure out what the different shows were going to be about for the day. So, the weather alerts, in times of emergency, I get that little buzz, to let me know that something's going on in this area and that I need to pay attention. So Newsline is so essential to all of us in the blind community. I normally use it on my iPhone through the app. But of course, I will dial in, and if I'm in the house, just put it on speakerphone or put my headphones on and walk around the house. I love Newsline.
All right, all right. Well, viewers, if you have not heard it before, you have heard it. You've heard it from Denise. We love NFB Newsline. It is a free audio information service, and it is fantastic. Well, Lee, what do you have to say about that?
Well, I tell you what, you guys about covered it all there. There's so much to NFB Newsline. Once again, it's a free audio information service. And it has so many different devices that you can utilize. And it's such a simple service an easy service to learn to use. You can use that with your landline phone. You can also use it with your smartphones with the app, as Denise has mentioned. You can also use it with your Victor Reader Stream. And you can also use it, I love using it with the Amazon Alexa. And I say that lightly because she's always listening. And
Yes.
I enjoy that as well. And my favorite newspaper too is the New York Times. I go to that a lot, as well as a lot of our publications in the Indiana area. We have 18 of those here. So we all inspire individuals to use this fantastic service. Those that are blind, those that are print challenged, those that are deaf blind, even those that have certain forms of dyslexia or shaking hand syndrome. So we have a wide variety of publications, as well as devices, and those that are eligible for the program. So pay attention to our commercials throughout the show, learn where to contact us, and we'll get you signed up. If you can't reach us, you can always reach the Indiana State Library, and they will sign you up as well. So we'll be right back, and stay tuned as we bring Denise Brown back in our next segment.
If you or someone you know is visually impaired or print challenged, the National Federation of the Blind has a resource you need.
I use NFB Newsline when reading Hammond Northwest Times.
Using NFB Newsline, I read the Christian Science magazine.
Dad, you read Jerusalem Post, too.
Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
Live the life you want. Read NFB Newsline.
It's free.
Welcome back to this segment of the National Federation of the Blind Newsline, Indiana. And our special guest today is Miss Denise Brown. And Denise, it is a pleasure having you on the show. And what we would like to know is a little bit more about you. Tell us, Denise, about your about Denise and your journey, transition, as I would like to call it, into the National Federation of the Blind. So let's start from perhaps when you were young.
Okay, so I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where I still live. I'm a proud resident of North Philadelphia. And at the age of about 2 years old, my grandmother noticed that I would bump into things when I was in a room with dim light. So my grandmother's concern led me to Wills Eye Hospital, which is here in Philadelphia. And during my diagnosis at Wills Eye Hospital, that's how we found out that I had retinitis pigmentosa, which of course is a degenerative disease of the retina and can lead to tunnel vision and many times total blindness. And of course, me bumping into things, that was the first symptom, because one of the main symptoms of retinitis pigmentosa is night blindness. So I never had the ability to, see at night. do things comfortably by myself outdoors. I can remember as a kid, I always had to, when the sun started going down and I was outside playing with the children outside, I would have to come back to my steps and, sit on my steps for, like the rest of the evening. I could talk to the kids, but I couldn't play with the kids because I couldn't see the kids. I understood that later, like years later, I was like, why did I have to come home? Well, I figured out I had to come home because I couldn't see. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I didn't go to a blindness school or anything. So I didn't have any skills. I wasn't using a cane, of course. So I went to regular elementary school in Philadelphia. The only drawback that I had at that time was I usually had to sit, close to the board in order to see it, but that wasn't a real problem. I was still able to read my own books with my own eyes. So I graduated high school, Overbrook High School in Philadelphia, without any additional assistive technology or anything, because I was still pretty good. I had my central vision stayed pretty intact for a good while. I went to Temple University to become a teacher. I always wanted to become a teacher. In elementary school and, high school, I was always the one who assisted other students when they were having problems with their schoolwork. So at an early age, I really loved to teach. So I went to Temple University. I got my bachelor's degree in elementary education. Upon graduation, I did get a job teaching in private schools first, because when I graduated, the school district of Philadelphia was full of teachers, and they weren't even given the tests so that you could teach in one of the school district of Philadelphia schools. But as time went on, 5 years later, they gave the test. I passed the test, and then I was able to pick a school in the public school system, which I chose a school, Kearney School in North Philadelphia, because, I'm a North Philadelphia resident most of my life. And I wanted to teach students who really needed assistance here in the inner city. I felt that was my obligation to give back to my community. Coming up, I'll give you a little bit about my family. My mother and father divorced very early on. But one of the great things about their divorce is that they both married other people who were the best partners for them. So I have a stepfather who, everything he does for me is like a father. My stepmother just passed away in 2020. And if you didn't know, my mother, the only reason I say she's my stepmother is because biologically, she did not give birth to me, but she was as good to me as my mother is now. I have two biological sisters by my father and my stepmother. They both live here in the Philadelphia area. And I have two cousins who are very much like sisters to me. So the five of us kind of grew up together. So with the retinitis pigmentosa, the night blindness, my family, always helped me get around in those dark situations, around town, at the movies, wherever. And as time went on, as I was teaching, my vision started getting a little worse. And I thought I wasn't going to be able to continue my teaching. But in a conversation with my mother, she told me about accommodations as far as her job was concerned. She had a flyer that she gave me from her job. She used to work for Verizon, and it talked about people with disabilities and what you should do if you want to try to continue your job. So basically, I talked to my principal, and she already knew I had a vision problem, but it had not really come to play in my work. And I told her all the different types of technology that I thought I would need, and possibly a full-time classroom assistant to help me with some of the paperwork. And we put that into the school district, and everything that I asked for, they gave me. So probably the last 12 years that I taught, I was legally blind, but with the help of the school district, as I said, they gave me everything to continue my job and to be successful. And when I decided to retire in 2002, it was because I just felt it was time. I could have taught longer, but retirement was going to give me time to do other things, like advocate for the National Federation of the Blind.
Well, Denise, that is one wonderful story and one wonderful journey. And there's so many other things that's tied to that reality of yours that there's another Denise Brown that's out there that's wanting to be a teacher and wanting to be in education. And we have to provide them with the resources. And we're definitely going to have you come back onto the show at another point in time too, so that we can share a little bit more about what some of the challenges are.
Yes.
And what some of the resources are. But we're going to move on. We're going to take us a short pause, and we're going to come back, and we're going to talk a little bit more about some the technologies. And we want everyone to stay tuned. We'll be right back.
I love to read. I've always loved to read. Reading takes me places I'm not able to go by air, bus, or car. I plan on reading every newspaper Newsline has.
No more did I have to wonder about the rest of the story when disaster struck. I could open the local paper for that town and find out. And when I discovered that NFB Newsline could be a powerful tool for TV watching, listing all my favorite channels and what was on when, I was most definitely hooked.
Welcome back to this segment of the National Federation of the Blind Newsline Indiana. We're speaking with Denise Brown. And Denise, let's talk a little bit about something that I ran across in the Braille Monitor. It says something about, oh, what a relief. So after I read that, I said, okay, So let's talk about your aha moment when you realized that you wanted or needed to use the white cane.
Okay, so as you know, Florence, with retinitis pigmentosa, you can function, almost as a sighted person, and if you're in the right situation. I had enough vision to kind of, get around the city and take the buses, and night blindness was always that thing that was the most prevalent in me. But there were times when I would miss different things. I might bump into something, as I'm walking down the street. Couple of times I might have missed the step or something, but I never fell, so that was good. But in the back of my mind, I knew if I was using a white cane, that would definitely help me. Also wasn't using a white cane because at that time I was worried about what other people thought, because, as people would say, when they looked at me, it didn't look like anything was wrong with my vision. So it was always, I know you get the same thing. You look like you can see. Well, I couldn't see too well. So one particular day when I was in Philadelphia, I was, doing my thing, walking down in Center City. without a cane, walking down Chestnut Street. And I made a left-hand turn on 6th Street in order to go north. And as I was walking, somehow, as I was walking, I went up in the air and I kept walking. And then all of a sudden I came down to the ground. And I was like, what was that? I was like, did I walk too close to the building? And did I walk up on top of a step and not know? Did I hit a barrier? What was it? So when I turned around, I could see this homeless man, and he started to look up. I knew that he knew something had happened, and I wasn't going to tell him what had happened. But what I realized that I did is that I caught his body and I walked across his body from his ankles up to his shoulders, and that's where I came off. I didn't get his head because his head was tucked into his body. So when I did that, I was like, oh, wow. I mean, if I had a cane, I would have felt that that barrier, or, as I came around the corner. And I would have known with the cane that I would have had to walk around whatever that obstacle was. So, I mean, that was my aha moment. And it still took me a little while to get myself together after that aha moment, but I knew I had to use a cane. And somehow, one day in the year 2000, I said to myself, tomorrow, I'm going to start using a white cane 24/7. And I went to work that day, and we were having a half day at school. And I told the principal that I wanted to have a chance to speak at our faculty meeting, and that I was going to tell the staff that starting tomorrow, they would see me come to work with my white cane. And I didn't want them to think that anything else, had happened to me traumatically. I wanted them to know that it was just time. And the faculty knew that I had a vision problem, but, to what extent, many of them did not know. So in that meeting, what I did not know when I expressed to the staff that I would be starting to use my white cane forever. Not only did she have the teaching staff in there, she had the lunch staff in there, the janitorial staff in there, the counseling staff was there. Everybody was in the room so that I could tell everybody at the same time. And from that day on, I've been using a white cane.
Well, what a revelation there. And everybody has a challenge with these accepting the white cane. And I know I had, and I know I've heard Florence talk about it as well. So that's a great story there. And I'm so glad, well, that you didn't have on high heels. So did you have on high heels?
I didn't. Because the stilettos would have really gotten him.
So, so let's move on here. Let's talk about you and your introduction to the National Federation of the Blind.
Okay, so a little bit after I started using my cane, toward the end of 2000, I was looking for assistive technology. And someone told me about this guy named Ted Young, and he had a technology company named Young Opportunities, where he, sold software and, worked with you on computers and things like that. So when I would call Ted Young, it would say, press 1 for Young Opportunities, press 2 if you want Ted Young, State President of the National Federation of the Blind of Pennsylvania. So after meeting Mr. Young and talking about technology, I asked him, what is this National Federation of the Blind? And so, he told me, it was an advocacy group, for blind individuals and, how they promote independence. And he told me there were 2 chapters in Philadelphia and that he advised me to visit both of them. And in 2002, with the Greater Philadelphia chapter, I was asked if I would fill in a year remaining. Someone had a year remaining on their election as second vice president. And I was asked to take that, if I could, run for that office, and I did. And a year later, the president was stepping down and she asked me about stepping up, and so I did. So I've been chapter president of the Greater Philadelphia chapter since 2003. And every day I'm doing my best to try to make the chapter better.
Well, you guys are doing such a great job with everything. And your journey is very exciting, and there's so much more to share. And we're going to get to that in a second interview with you. And for right now, we're going to take a short pause and we're going to come back and conclude our show. So everyone stay tuned. We'll be right back.
The National Federation of the Blind knows that blindness is not the characteristic that defines you or your future. Every day we raise the expectations of blind people because low expectations create obstacles between blind people and our dreams. You can live the life you want. Blindness is not what holds you back.
Welcome back to the conclusion of our show. We've been talking with Denise Brown. And Denise, do you have any parting words for our viewers?
Well, yes. First of all, I want to thank you for allowing me this time to speak to your viewers. So just basically, the National Federation of the Blind is definitely your greatest resource.
Stay safe, and we'll see you next week.
National Federation of the Blind, Newsline, Indiana. For more information, go to nfb-in.org or call 855-963-6476. That's 855-963-6476. The National Federation of the Blind encourages you to live the life you want.